So the God has watched your life in the cinema and he said, you kind of suck, you know. Like, yeah, maybe. I'll give you 6, maybe. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. So in this video I want to discuss one cultural issue. Essentially this video is just me trying to convince myself to stop doing bad things and start doing good things, or at least proceed doing good things and not doing bad things, okay? So this is kind of a sermon for myself, right? So when I'm saying you in this video, I'm actually addressing myself. Long story short, but maybe it will be helpful for somebody else as well. So it's kind of just me thinking out loud, if you wish. So let's start. So who am I, right, is a question that pretty much any decent person, I would think, have asked themselves at least once. You may even probably try to correlate the level of your decency with the amount of times you've asked yourself this question, right? Or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The point is that it's actually a very difficult question, right? However, the answer to it is surprisingly simple. So it goes roughly like this. You are a solidified remnant of your actions, alright? A memory, a footprint of your actions, if you wish. Both within yourself and sort of in the outside world, like whatever you leave in the world as your footprint, basically, is who you are. Because that's how you are sort of perceived by the world, through your impact onto it, right? Pretty obvious stuff, really, but, you know, pretty simple as well, right? So if you want to be a good person, what follows from this, from what I just said, just do good things, right? Because that's how you leave a good footprint. So what you do makes who you are. You want to change who you are? Incredibly simple. Just change what you do. Easy peasy, right? So sometimes we are aware of this, actually, right? When we are, for example, in some sort of a difficult situation, and then, like, a lot of people in difficult situations, they are doing the correct choice. You know, they're doing the good thing, the right thing. I'm not gonna even try to deconstruct that, you know, the morality is subjective, good and bad, and blah, blah, blah. Again, I'm just talking to myself here, okay? So for me, it's self-evident what is good and what is bad. At least most of the time, okay? So yeah, so when there is pressure, so returning to my point, so when you're under pressure, right, in those difficult situations, it's kind of like you kind of know that it is important, that your decision matters, and therefore you try to make a good decision, right, rather than making a bad one. However, that's the problem, exactly, and this is what I want to kind of focus on in this video, is the problem of free time, the problem of leisure time, if you wish. Is that it's exactly the opposite of a difficult situation, and it is exactly the place from where all those demons creep in because you don't pay attention, roughly speaking. So under pressure you do pay attention, so you're kind of aware and you do the right stuff, but when you're relaxed, you're not aware anymore and bad stuff might happen, right? So this is kind of what I'm talking about here. What I will focus on in this video. Anyway, so yeah, well, I pretty much made the main point, but anyway, let me try to kind of justify it a little bit. So on many occasions, again, it's not obvious that what you do is important, right? That's how people get fat, for example, and unhealthy in generally, in any respect, by the way, including morally, not just physically, right? So that's how they degenerate over years and decades, right? They keep doing those small things which don't look important at the moment, right? It's exactly this leisure kind of occupation, so to speak. So they kind of let them slide, and those bad things keep accumulating, and the person turns into a bad person. Why? Because they kept doing bad stuff, right? They just didn't pay attention. This is exactly the how would you say it? Not the justification, the illustration of what I said at the beginning of, like, you are what you do, essentially, right? Yeah, so these people just didn't know they've actually like those bad things actually counted on every separate occasion, but they did, right? And they added up to something horrific in the end. So yeah, so in this respect, free time is a big danger. You know, in Russian, I'm not sure about English or any other languages, but in Russian there's a saying, sloth is the mother of all sins, okay? which kind of means exactly that when you are relaxed, when you have nothing to do, like, you may actually do bad stuff, right? Or, you know, you wouldn't bother doing anything good anyway, right? Something like this. And I believe that, you know, many, types of ethics actually stem from this, like Protestant ethics or Asian ethics, like in China or Japan specifically, right? Where it is kind of hard work is praised, essentially, okay? That's what I'm saying. Because I would assume that's where it stems from. Like, if you work hard, you're doing something useful anyway, so you just don't have this leisure time to degenerate into someone bad, right? So there's not much room for sloth, idleness, etc., and the following degeneration, basically. And there's this quote from Thomas Carlyle, you know, the sage of Chelsea, who said that hard work essentially is the cure from all illnesses. Now, again, I don't necessarily agree with this, because, well, again, it's kind of stems from this logic that I just outlined, right? It's only if people cannot hold themselves responsible for what they do, they have to be held responsible by somebody else. So somebody else has to tell them, why are you just lying down? Go and do something useful, you know, go and work, right? That's kind of the idea. And Friedrich the Great actually had some similar quotes, but I couldn't actually find them when I was searching for them. So I guess no luck. Anyway, so yeah, it's a frequent kind of sentiment in today's egoistic, might I say, society. Again, I'm pretty old, right? I sound very old. But anyway, like, it's my free time. I can do whatever I want in your free time. And this is true, but you also, like, that's the problem with doing whatever you want, is that you may become, in the end, remember our introduction, right? You may become, by doing whatever you want, you may become someone you don't like, let alone anyone else, right? No one likes, basically, right? It's just as, again, Robert Fripp said, that people keep doing what they want, not what they need. And I think that's a brilliant quote exactly in this respect, right? People keep doing what they want, not what they need, and that's the problem, right? So, yeah. And more, I want to specifically focus, like, on this moment of entertainment, right, and leisure time, because I've been thinking recently about, like, the most popular forms of entertainment, like specifically cinema and games, video games, right? The thing is that everything you read and watch and play directly impacts your view of the world, right? It quite literally, like, shapes your world. It is literally the most important thing in this sort of outwards gnoseological, high-level, metaphysical stuff that you have, right? Like, whatever you saw in the movies, whatever you've read about in books, whatever you've played in, I don't know, played out in your video games or whatever, kind of creates this outward, like, far away, you know, firmament of your worldview, so to speak, right? So things you haven't actually interacted with in your own life, but you kind of heard that those things exist. But since you haven't had the ability to even confirm or deny that those things exist, you kind of assume they do exist by default, because you've read about them, you've played the games with them, or you've watched a movie about them. You see what I'm saying? So it's like this faraway background horizon, or firmament, if you prefer, of your worldview. And this is the danger of this stuff, right? I'm not even talking about this moralistically, but more like gnoseologically, okay? But I mean, everything is kind of mixed together in this respect. So, what is the lesson here, basically? Lesson is choose your entertainment wisely, because it dictates what you see around you every day. Again, it dictates your worldview in this way or another. So, why is that? Well, one reason is that you can't really experience anything without your consciousness. And your consciousness is filled with images and ideas that you take in when you are the most relaxed, actually, right? During entertainment. And I'm not gonna give you any metaphors about relaxing and something entering you, okay? But yeah, you can think it through yourself. So what I'm kind of implying here is that, for example, reading a stupid book or watching a stupid movie in this moment, when you are relaxed and uncritical, and you are just kind of soaking it in, it does much more harm than not reading anything or not watching anything altogether, okay? So this is kind of the thing, and this is kind of where the pinnacle of my point so far goes, that when you are relaxed, you can not only do bad things, but you can also let bad, in like thick quotation marks, things into your worldview, if you wish, okay? Yeah. And let alone like modern forms of relaxation, if you can call it that, like all those shorts and reels and streams even, you know. I was always wondering, like, what is the substance that is being streamed when somebody streams? You may think about it yourself again. Imagine different substances being streamed onto you from your screen. Yeah. So basically, to kind of sum it up, I guess, not quite actually, we'll talk about this a minute more, but to quasi-sum it up, when you are relaxed and you're kind of soaking in those novel experiences, for the lack of a better word, some sort of like automatic assumption and agreement and compliance happens on your side. You're kind of letting it all in. Because again, even to perceive a plot of a movie, let's say, you kind of have to at least partly agree that the premise is correct, right? And once you agree that the premise is correct, like, boom, like you've signed the contract, you know, with the devil or whatever, you know. I mean, I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm just kind of jokingly adding this here. But it's actually quite a lot like, you know, clicking like OK on terms and agreements and whatever, you know, like nobody reads them, like this EULA, whatever, terms of service, user agreement. And by the way, this Scottish comic dude, Limmy, has a brilliant sketch about this. I'm going to link it in the description about the user agreement. But yeah, this is kind of the situation you're in. You agree with something that you kind of inherently are unaware of, right? There's an expression in Russian. It's a cat in a bag, cat in a bag, right? Or Pandora's box, if you wish, something like this. Basically, you don't know what's inside, right? But you are agreeing with it by default when you are, again, relaxed and you're kind of on your leisure time. So hopefully you get the idea, right? And to kind of summarize this point, if you think about what books were actually just, I mean, I'm saying were because nobody really reads books anymore, right? Books were/are just instructions for your imagination, if you think about it, right? Kind of the author kind of asks you, he gives you or she gives you instructions to sort of create mentally a model, like a small theater in your head with all the concepts and perhaps like if it's a work of, you know, like traditional fiction, characters, and they play in your head, you know, in this fictional or fictitious, whatever, model in your head. So they do stuff, you imagine them doing this stuff, and then you're getting the emotion, or you're getting the idea, in case of, this theater was filled with concepts and relationships between them, right? When we're dealing with philosophy or psychology or theoretical physics, if you wish, right? So yeah, so you read, you create a mental model, you observe this mental model, like stuff behaves as the author says it to behave, right? And then you get an emotion or understanding from it. That's the kind of the pipeline of how book works, right? How a book works. And here you have like limited compliance because you may disagree at any step, right? So when you're reading, like, I mean, you can read at your own pace, right? And you can stop and disagree. Like, I've had many occasions when I've read bullshit texts, like Hegel, for example, where I was just like, you know, doing this and saying, what is he saying? Like, this is absurd. The guy is crazy. Like, this is bullshit that I'm reading, right? And I'll just throw the book away, right? Or something. So you have this only limited compliance, right? You can walk away at any point. However, when you watch a movie or you play a game, like, it's associated with a certain tempo, certain inherent tempo, right? And you can't just kind of pull back because then you won't be doing it anymore, if you wish, right? So, plus, the model that we talked about, that you create this mental model in your imagination. In this case, the model is already made for you, right? Everything is already pictured for you there, and everything kind of moves on its own, by its own relation, like whatever the expression. You kind of only need to be there to just observe or play, right, and watch it unfold. So here we have kind of like a full compliance. You're either here or you're not here at all, right? So yeah. And by the way, like one person actually talked about how it kind of returning to this issue of a firmament, right? Mental firmament, if you wish. Somebody said that the brain development works in such a way that when you see something that you've never seen before, it makes you actually like remember it really well, okay? And that only kind of reinforces whatever I said, that if you see Darth Vader and stormtroopers when you're like 70 years old, you would remember it for the rest of your life, because like it just doesn't happen in real life, right? And your brain thinks it's important because it's so unusual, right? So this is what I'm saying, what I was saying actually previously. Anyway, yeah, and the last thing, I'm kind of returning to from where I've started, right? That about what matters, right? And that you should do good things. And remember, I'm talking to myself mostly, right? So I'm remembering here what Jordan Peterson said. Watch my video about him, by the way, an old one. Well, basically, he said that if you want to have a meaningful life, you have to be prepared for everything to matter, right? Because what is a meaningful life? It's a life where everything matters, actually. Everything has a meaning, right? So you kind of lose the ability to do something unimportant, if you know what I mean. And it kind of, you know, returning to my initial kind of sub-point about leisure time, right? It's also important, basically, right? That's the point. So hopefully you can see how it all kind of comes together, right? So that's what responsibility means, right? That everything matters. Like there's nowhere to run from things that matter, ultimately. Every little thing does. And it's also kind of very similar to what Nietzsche said about religious people. Again, Peterson is a religious person, for example. So basically, I don't remember where, but, and I only vaguely remember the idea, but Nietzsche said that for religious people, he specifically talked about Christians, but for many other religions, it fits as well. Their whole life is basically like a movie, okay? Where they are the main character, the protagonist, right? And so, just like in any movie, I mean, obviously Nietzsche didn't talk about movies because they didn't exist, but he was talking about like a theater and blah, blah, blah. But the idea was that everything happens for a reason, for a religious person, right? And this reason is somehow related to them, right? Everything is either a blessing or how do you call it, a challenge, right? To overcome, you know, blah, 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 you know, something like this. So everything matters in this sense. And right now, with our experience of movies and games, we can say that, yeah, if you're a religious person, you are a protagonist. But that's how you get the meaning in your life, right? Everything matters. That's kind of the whole idea, because in a movie, everything is supposed to matter. You're only shown things that, you know, kind of fit in, right? That have some meaning. So yeah, this is exactly what you get. And who's your audience then is a good question. I don't remember Nietzsche talking about this. Maybe he did, actually. But, well, the audience is your God, right? Like, whoever's gonna judge you in the end. And kind of, you know, put like 5 or 7 on Metacritic for your life or something, you know? Or on Rotten Tomatoes, yeah. So, the God has watched your life in the cinema and he said, you kind of suck, you know? Like, yeah, maybe. I'll give you 6, maybe. Yeah. Okay. I guess that would be mostly all. And, well, certainly I've repeated my main point like 15 times already. So, conclusions, right? So what have we talked about here? We talked about the question, who am I? And basically the answer to this question is, you are what you do, right? And if you want your life to be meaningful, you can't pretend that what you do does not matter. In fact, you kind of have to assume that everything matters, even your leisure time. And specifically, again, it probably actually matters the most because, again, it produces this large-scale worldview that you have, firstly. And secondly, in your leisure time, you are the most vulnerable to doing bad stuff, right? So, yeah. Or at least I can say that this is the area where most attention is needed for an average person, such as myself, for example. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.
If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.